As stated in the New York Times in 2019, this has been an ominous year for reproductive rights in America. In this editorial, it is mentioned that there are controversies about cutting the Title X family planning program. For those who aren't aware, it does help poor women afford birth control, cancer screenings, and testing for HIV. I will discuss some of the oppositions I found within this article, such as the lack of information as well as the accuracy of the information, and lastly, some of the further beliefs of the Trump administration that was not mentioned in this editorial. In the editorial, it just got harder to get birth control in America. It discusses how beneficial Title X family planning program has been to our lower class citizens. The fact that they have served more than 4 million women in 2017 alone, which 42% of them were uninsured. Although this editorial shares these statistics about what Title X has done, it does not mention what would happen without it, besides the fact that it holds a threat but isn't informing of the severity of the situation. Some of the most dangerous threats to reproductive rights have been creeping up on us for years, says the New York Times. It could have been helpful if this editorial were to have gone in depth with some of the actual harm that could do to society if something like this were to actually happen. The theoretical literature provides competing hypotheses about how the state legislation protecting abortion clinics and reproductive rights might influence crimes against clinics, and some argue that there could be backlash of these effects. Some things that were mentioned in the article were saying that there could be very violent things happening to some of these clinics, very violent protesting as well, said Pridemore and Frillich, 2007. Another point was it was not mentioned in this editorial more depth of information about actual findings of the Title X family planning program. Some of it has gone through as well as trying to fight to stay afloat. Mentioned in the editorial, the program has sustained significant budget cuts with current findings current fundings of $36.2 million below what it was 3 years ago. This information could have been better understanding as what else Title X has gone through as far as funding. With coming in contact with this article, I found different information than what was stated in the editorial in the New York Times. In the New York Times, it mentioned that the Institute estimated that for every dollar the federal government spends on family planning, that it saves more than $7. But in the article from Golden Benson in 2014, every dollar invested in the publicly funded family planning efforts were to save $5.68. So just some of the information wasn't quite accurate that could have been in the editorial. And lastly, in this editorial from the New York Times, it's basically based on birth control in America and how it's getting harder to obtain it, but it also briefly mentions what the Trump administration feels about it and that it is not a proper form of contraceptive. Trump and his administration have been attempting to get rid of contraceptives this entire year, more than ever, but when researching in this editorial, fails to mention that there are religious beliefs behind the statements that were made and the potential reasoning for wanting to terminate the Title X family planning program. In my research findings, it was mentioned the rules allow entities to deny coverage of contraceptives to how they have a religious and moral objective, including certain contraceptive services, which they consider to be abortion. And In conclusion, although this editorial was able to bring awareness to the surface of the potential harms and vague facts, I was able to discuss the threats that could happen, more factual information on the funding, and some background of what the Trump administration actually thinks and why they're wanting to cut this title. It is safe to say that this editorial from the New York Times has more information that they could have included on this topic of birth control and what reproductive rights as a female are having to face. And I hope this was able to enlighten you with more information, as well as inform you of the things that could have made this editorial stronger as a reader.